So a warm welcome from our side. My name is Kai. I'm a project manager at Martel, and then for DEL4ALL, I'm supporting Monique in the coordination of the project. So we are very glad that middle of July you can join us for this hopefully interesting interaction between the project consortium and our experts. Today we count it as the first official interaction, like through internet, but sort of live interaction with our experts. So I will short overview of the agenda. So, we will first introduce the project, and then we have Alex, who will give us the context of teaching and learning in the time of COVID-19. And as he already mentioned in the email, he will also brought in some insights of the first survey that we have done, and to then make way for the further discussion with our. Then we have the panel session, which we have several panelists that we are very happy to have with us to discuss their individual perspective based on their backgrounds in the digital enhanced learning environment, where we also have Anne from the European Commission to join us. Thank you very much. And then we have eventually the conclusion and outlook, and hopefully we also have some time for the Q&A. Okay. Please. So, as many of you have already heard last time that I have made a short discussion, short presentation on DEL4ALL. It is a project that aims to bring all the different types of stakeholders together who cares about education to discuss about its future. So, the all actually means that it's regardless of age, gender, or any other socioeconomic status. We will be able to hear your voice and include your thoughts in our findings. And in particular, we want to identify different emergent technology that will help with our digital education, and especially this COVID-19 show how important this means for our community. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, and these are just some of the shorter version of our objectives. So first, we are going to create a solid knowledge base, and for that, we are doing 3 metrics that we had our last webinar for, which was the metric that is aimed to present all the examples and technologies and good practices, and that we can share and make it available to the community in one place. And then through that, we aim to develop a collaborative ecosystem that includes experts and interested parties like you to interact with us and help us to enrich the whole experience. And eventually, our plan is to develop a strategic and forward-looking agenda, which we can help also work with the European Commission together, that will build this format that we can contribute. How do we contribute to the future of education through digital technologies? Next, please. And yeah, this basically shows a bit more of the approaches that we're using. As mentioned, we do have the metric at the center of all the activities, and then through the metrics, then we use the stakeholder engagement approach, which are surveys, discussions, and workshops. Of course, now we cannot do face-to-face, unfortunately. But we are trying to we'll keep the impact and maximize the impact actually through frequent interaction with you online, such as a workshop like this. And then we will have in the top parts, the outputs are mainly approached at the analysis, the results of our research on the examples and technologies that we found. a set of best practices, and then very importantly, our roadmap towards the future. So please stay with us and stay tuned with our activities, and because we are going to be quite active on these fronts, and follow us on our Twitter. Thank you very much. So I give the floor back to you, Alex.
Thanks, Kai. I'm aware of the fact that there's a bit of an echo. I've had a couple of people pinging me. So Verena, if you can look over my shoulder and for the time being mute people. Yes, I'm really going to try and get through this very quickly. I'm very much aware that I'm in a community of colleagues and that a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you now is known, experienced material, really, especially those of us who are in the trenches of either still teaching or consulting to education institutions. So the first thing I want to talk about, though, is the obvious stuff, which has had an impact on our lives. So if you're looking at context, very quickly, over the last, I guess, couple of months, what's happened is that higher education woke up to the fact that it does not operate in a vacuum, that something major happened, which has impacted higher education. The first thing we experienced were, at least in many countries, were lockdowns, being stuck in between four walls, being told where to go and where not to go. We're then told to stay at home, which immediately meant that for a lot of us who may not be spending a lot of time at home, suddenly home became a totally different space and a different place that needed to be reclaimed, reappropriated. Then public spaces got closed. So it's not just lockdown and stay at home, being able to go outside became very difficult. And then we're told to work from home. And particularly those of us who come from an education background, working from home literally meant from one day to the next, people migrated out of comfortable or uncomfortable offices, large lecture halls, study units, to be told work from home. And then more importantly, broadcast from home. Now, this is something which we started to experience. In a way, I think in the first couple of weeks, it was quite amusing seeing also how, when I'm saying broadcast, even media broadcast, seeing the various, Jimmy Fallon's and Stephen Colbert's, I guess, that in a way, the pandemic was a huge leveler, that all of us were in this kind of situation of broadcasting from home. But at the same time, we're told socially distance. And I think if you look at the combination of all of these things, the socially distanced and broadcasting from home, and the rest of it, it created a very weird dynamic with some impacts. One of them was relationship meltdowns, whether with people you like or you don't like, sometimes being stuck in the same place or in different places and needing to work with them or broadcast with them. The second one is it became quite obvious, and I'm looking at governance in the widest sense, not just mainstream governance, but also maybe institutional governance and various meltdowns, which became quite publicized. Another thing which started to worry people most: what's going to happen to the economy? People being laid off, people being told even to leave one country where they'd migrated to and go elsewhere. And there's more to come. We think, we hope not, but the idea of a second wave is very much there. And when you look at the challenges for higher education, I'm going to base the next couple of slides on two sources. One is the survey that Martel ran, and we had some very interesting insights from that. I think the second one is very much our lived experiences and discussions amongst us as partners in DEL4ALL. Joining us today is Wolfgang Prinz from Fraunhofer, Professor John Domingue from Open University, and Sabine and my other colleagues over there. So this has been, what I'm going to tell you is also what we've been discussing amongst ourselves. And a lot of us have been in various webinars that sometimes skirt the project or address it. For example, on the 7th of July, DGEAC actually had a webinar where they were starting to look at the digital education action plan, but they started by reflecting on what's happening with COVID and digital education. And we too have been organizing as a center, the Commonwealth Center for Connected Learning, some webinars where we've been diving into some of this stuff. In this case, there's Natalie Smolensky, who's one of the experts on DEL4ALL. So what happened with education is a number of things. One is that overnight we went into remote emergency teaching. And what this really means when you dive into it is really the DIY digitalization of offline education. Nobody was prepared, despite the fact that the idea of digital education or blended education has been on the agenda for at least the last 20 years. Overnight, people scrambled to digital tools, and those digital tools were anything from, I've actually seen educators initially getting a whiteboard in their home and actually writing on it and projecting a camera onto it and using Skype, to using WhatsApp, to eventually using the various Zooms, Teams, Google, whatever we could get our hands on. Everybody scrambled and mobilized. But what this started to reflect were a number of things. One is the digital skills deficit, and the deficit wasn't both on the teaching side and on the learning side, with various challenges. There were various heroic moments. I think anybody who's been deployed as a CIO at a university, I think these are the real heroes who managed to get people who sometimes were actually not just technology agnostic, but worse than that, always assumed that this kind of technology had nothing to do with their lives. But it exposed also deficits from the learner's side. Not everybody had a decent webcam. Not everybody had a decent broadband connection. And it's also exposed then these digital divides that we've been maybe assumed that exist in certain countries and don't exist in others. And there have been a lot of discussions about these and what could be done to rectify them. Maybe one of the most frustrating ones was management disconnects. In many universities around Europe, many people in top positions in higher education institutions kept on waiting for somebody to tell them what to do, and sometimes even blamed it on the governments of the day as to what to do. Some of that still rambles on. The most fundamental one was assessments. What to do with assessments. If for many years the Victorian model of higher education meant that people got examined in closed halls and through pen and paper, assessing people online proved to be a huge challenge. And that also reflected an ongoing pedagogical crisis. The most fundamental one, though, is a business model crisis. At DEL4ALL, we're talking about decentralized, resilient models for education. What we have now found is that we do have a decentralized model, but it's certainly not resilient. If you look at the whole, nobody quite knows if people are going to go back to university lecture halls when we have social distancing and potentially a second wave. We asked in our survey for people to come up with ideas, with opportunities. So I'm going to share with you 3 slides as to what people actually said. The first one might seem obvious, but how do we do this? A lot of people told us this is the time is ripe to transform the entire education ecosystem. So what we need now is adaptive, lean, higher education institutions. Now compare that to the traditional bricks and mortar institution. Not everybody could mobilize in the same way that, say, an open university could mobilize that has always been online. Second thing is people are talking about what is a smart campus? How does this really operate? And in the process, people are saying we really need to revisit the purpose, the methodologies, the very relevance of what we call education. So we need to, in a way, accept that this notion of hybrid or blended teaching and learning is here to stay, and also to recognize that what we've been doing over the last 3 months has not really been hybrid or blended teaching and learning. It's been that DIY emergency education. But in the process, there needs to be a recognition that many business processes within higher education institutions need to be re-engineered. We need to accept that there's a need for changes in education policy, potentially more inspired leadership in many higher education institutions. The last one may be obvious to us, those of us who for many years tried to promote things like OER. Some people have to stop fighting technology now. The second main wave of opportunities people are seeing are in personalized technologies. Let's look at what we mean by decentralized, resilient infrastructures. How can we deploy affordable, socially responsible, and emerging technologies? Specifically, how can we improve the production and delivery of relevant, up-to-date education materials? Again, what systems do we need to really assess learning? There's one big dilemma that Yuval Harari has been talking about ever since the pandemic, which is all related to surveillance capitalism. What are we going to do in terms of the affordances of big data versus, say, GDPR versus personal surveillance? And the last wave was this need for tailored, personalized education. We need to recognize that the social context of learning is changing. We need to recognize that for many years, students have been running to also get educated via YouTube clips, via wikis. That has become an essential part of the learning. Okay. Another issue or challenge is that higher education institutions need to recognize, maybe finally, that they are really part of a lifelong learning ecosystem. And then in a way, we do need to look again at personalized, flexible, modular, and adaptive learning, and whether we should be looking at tools which have been long available, the various OERs and LMSs, and improving those, but also recognize that if we are looking at lifelong learning, that people are going to be accumulating credentials on a piecemeal basis. Let's again revisit digital and micro credentials if we really want to involve solutions which can produce digitally empowered students. In a way, we never do one thing in education. We never speak to the learners. We always assume that it's okay. I think it's about time that we need to start listening to young people, the so-called digital natives. And that's really what I had. I don't know if that was 10 minutes or not. I wasn't looking at my clock, but what I'd like to do now, on the basis of, in a way, what I've shared with you, is to open up this discussion. And I will, stop sharing my screen, I think. But what I'd like to do first is get Anne, Rosa, Eva, Anthony, and Filippo, in a way, just introduce themselves. And I think also say something about, in a minute, about the particular area of expertise. Anne, if you could unmute yourself, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anne Bajal. I'm working at the European Commission in DG Connect, in the unit G2, which is dealing with interactive technologies, digital for education and culture. And we are in charge of the DEL4ALL project, so that's why I'm on board today.
Rosa.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I am an astrophysicist by training, but I specialized and have now a PhD on science education. And my power and the power of the team around me is teacher training and empowerment. And I could relate so much to everything that Alex was saying, like all the things that suddenly we knew were there and emerging, and everyone is realizing, oh, you've been talking about that for so long. So yeah, we have a non-governmental organization for development in Portugal, but we have a network in more than 100 countries. So we are really the best friends of teachers. So that's what we do.
Eva.
Yeah, my name is Eva Poxleitner. I'm business unit manager for learning technologies at the Fraunhofer Academy. The Fraunhofer Academy is the continuing education institution of the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, and it is to dare to promote the transfer of knowledge from research Fraunhofer institutes to business enterprises. And my area of expertise is learning technologies, and here I want to speak about especially learning analytics and how it can facilitate process in blended learning programs.
Okay, let me invite Anthony. For you guys who don't know Anthony, Anthony was also a collaborator with me when we wrote a major study on the blockchain in education. Anthony wears different hats. Anthony.
Hi there. So yeah, my name is Anthony. I tend to wear two hats. One which is quality assurance of digital technologies in education, and recently also a focus on digital credentialing, which in particular led to the launch of the DEL4ALL last week.
And finally, Filippo Zatti.
First of all, good morning, everyone, again, and thank you for the invitation to Alex Grech. My name is Filippo Zatti, as Alex told, and I'm associate professor at the University of Florence. I'm a legal scholar, and my field of expertise is due to my profession, obviously, but I am very interested in deepening educational technology, especially with the application of blockchain artificial intelligence. Thank you.
And finally, I can see that Monique actually joined. Yeah, so Monique, you're with us now.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Apologies for my delay. I had connectivity problems. Remote work means also sometimes turbulent working conditions. I'm very glad to be here, and yes, I will intervene as long as the discussions go on. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Monique. And again, I'm aware of the fact that John Demang and Wolfgang Prinz and Sabine Kolvenbach, our colleagues at on DEL4ALL, are also available. When I spoke to Filippo last night and Anthony earlier in the day yesterday, what I suggested is that we'll use a couple of questions as triggers. And then we'll see how the discussion goes. Verena, if you can time manage me, please. So feel free to intervene at some stage and tell me if we're going to overrun, okay? But the first question we had really was quite on the basis of what I've just shared with you. I mean, what key lessons are we really learning from the pandemic that are of specific relevance to digitally enhanced learning and the digitally enhanced learning that we need, assume from 2021 onwards? So I'm asking you to do something quite challenging, a bit of future gazing, a bit of looking at the technologies we have or we think are in the pipeline. But what lessons are we learning? And so I'm going to, I can either pick somebody can volunteer to go first. I was always going to volunteer Anthony, and I'll tell you why. Anthony's been very involved in a project called DEL4ALL. And sometimes when I think of technologies and technologies that need to be adopted on a mass basis, you need somebody from high up. And in this case, it was the commission many years ago who said that if you want to apply for a job with the commission, this is the kind of format that you need to have. Behind the DEL4ALL, there are plans for even to incorporate this within blockchain. And Anthony has also been looking at the European Digital Credentials Infrastructure Project. So Anthony, I'm going to volunteer you to go first. And then my suggestion would be for people just to dive in and we'll see where this question goes, okay? What the answers are. Key lessons we're learning from the pandemic. What's of relevance to the digital enhanced learning that we need? Anthony.
Okay, I'm not sure how many of these insights will come from DEL4ALL directly, but obviously I've been doing 2 or 3 calls with universities all over the world on how to adapt to COVID-19 for the past 2 weeks. And I think a couple of things come to the fore to start it off. First of all is simply enough that the cloud works. institutions that were not relying on their own infrastructure, but were relying on cloud-based infrastructure, were able to scale very quickly and very effectively. And I think the first lesson is to just admit that, let's say, collaboration technologies have become consumerized, and that we can rely on users to use the technologies that are most convenient to them. And to some extent, this obsession of certain institutional IT managers of keeping everything in-house in the institution may not be the right way of organizing your infrastructure for the current times. Those people had a lot more work in the last 3 months. The second thing, though, which I wanted to come to is I'm not sure actually that COVID-19 is changing anything. All I am really seeing is a lot of institutions moving classroom-based lectures online. How is that really any different? I'm not seeing massive changing in methodologies. I'm not seeing a move to problem-based learning, to project-based learning, to asking people to, let's say, work with these types of tech. And I think the reasons for this, and this is why I was also mentioning quality assurance before, is that COVID-19 has not changed the fundamentals of the way the education system is organized. Teachers still have the same amount of time to prepare their lectures and to teach. Classes are still the same size. There's no extra tech that is supporting you leading with an increasing number of students. It hasn't promoted personalized learning more. All of these things require fundamental changes in organization of how educational institutions are. And all COVID-19 really has done is just change the communications method. So I must admit that this COVID will change everything. I take with a massive grain of salt. If you ask me personally, I think in 1 year we'll be loading 500 students into a class and changing nothing, or maybe we'll allow them to watch the recorded lectures if we're lucky. I'm very, very pessimistic on this. The last thing I will mention, and this comes from one thing we've been realizing on Europass, we delivered a massive product which we had to move from working every day in offices in 3 countries together to moving a team of nearly 200 people online and having to move our launch deadline 3 months forward. And more or less we delivered it. But one of the main challenges we saw is that working online only works. Working in-face only works as well. A lot of challenges come when you try and create a hybrid of the two. So if you have some people in office and some people online, it gets much more complicated. If you've ever been in a video conference where half the people are online and 4 of them were sitting in the same boardroom, you also have experienced this. So actually creating a hybrid world, ironically, might be the most complicated scenario of them all. So that's just maybe 3 early observations to get it started.
Okay, I'm going to follow up from Anthony's polemical viewpoint. Okay, and I think initially I'd like to ask, and I think in order, I think we can go with Rosa and Ava, and then I'll ask Anne if she has anything to say on that before I dive into Filippo. So, Rosa, on the basis of what you heard initially you could relate to, and now Anthony is telling us, you know what, nothing's going to change. What's your view?
Yeah, I fear that a little bit, because now we have this huge, massively number of teachers that are trying to mimic what they do in classroom in front of the computer, and they're becoming burned out in no time. Students are becoming completely disappointed with education. And I do agree that there needs to be a decision on policymakers, on the headmasters, on the head of units, to tell this is not the way to do it. We have to change. Teachers need more time. The personalized learning is something that it's really very important, because we are all different. As you've been mentioned here, we are talking to digitally native students that are self-tutoring themselves in a way that it's appealing to them, that's interesting for them, but very often recurring to not very reliable information because they're not experienced, they don't know exactly where to go, they don't know the path. And I think that preparing teachers is the most urgent thing we have to do, to tell them this is not the way to go. We have to shift to another model which is more promoting personalization, differentiation, having students work in different projects that are appealing to them while delivering knowledge. And this is a very demanding task, especially in Europe, where we have teachers' age are the highest. So we need new blood in education, urgently need that. We shouldn't fear having new blood. And we need to listen more to the students, because in the end, they are kind of, I work a lot in design thinking for education. And we see that teachers are not listening to the students, and as such, they are losing their clients, if I can use this terminology. So this is something that needs to be done. Teachers need to understand, to stop fearing technology, to embrace technology as best friend, and use the several tools that are out there that allows teachers to give more freedom to the students, personalized opportunities for each different student according to their own learning style, and follow what their progress, not doing the traditional assessment model. I think this is, to me, the most urgent thing to be done.
I'm going to go to Eva, because I know Eva has expertise in analytics, and we talk about tools, and essentially this is a project which reports into DG Connect. So the primary focus is what technologies, can we put technologies to good use in a way in this troubled environment? What do you feel about what you heard now, Eva?
Sure. I can absolutely agree, because even in stable times, students have encountered academic or personal difficulties, and now with the pandemic, it's really getting extra difficult. They need extra help, and so technology can help identify and support students which are at risk. And they can do this, for example, with learning analytics. You can use them even in live online lectures. See how is the alignment of the online teaching of the student, what is he learning, what are the differences, to get some pinpoints, and also see in learning management system at which point certain students are drifting off, like not really learning the things they have to learn, just getting out of the systems. And you can track this learning behavior, and you can see different types of students who are in every lecture doing certain examples, and you can see how the attention span of some students drift away, and then you can do something. And these learning analytic tools can then help, for example, the teachers to go to the students which have problems, or even to integrate systems which automatically send an email to a student or get a trigger like, oh, how are you doing? Do you have any problems with this part of the learning? This could be a subtle way to help people to learn the stuff they need to learn for themselves. So just support them in the way they are learning, and now with the enhanced difficulties, to make it even easier for everyone, not only for the students, but also for the staff, which is responsible for the student learning progress. And I also think a really important topic is all the process with online exams. We now see that some universities really have difficulties to get people to make really great online proctored exams, to help them do this. And there you could also build in new systems like there are in some institutions, which I think would enhance the process for every student to get their credentials and not have to wait for like half a year to get their exams finished.
And I'm going to, I'm pretty much aware that you primarily here, you want to listen to this as a backdrop, okay? But I'm also aware of the fact that we had our initial conversations. You kept on telling us, focus on the technology side, because at the end of the day, where we need to get to is come up with ideas as to how to improve this complicated landscape. How do you react to some of these views here? Because some of the problems seem to be very systemic process management problems. And yet Eva is saying there are tools that can already be deployed to improve the situation. What's your first reaction at hearing this?
Well, I basically agree with everything that has been said so far. So, I mean, yes, I think what we saw during this crisis is two steps. The first step was how we were responding to the emergency, and the emergency was just to transfer the offline classes to online. This is one issue, and then we had the issue of the digital skills and the divide and so on. And then there is a second issue, which to my opinion, we are more concerned with, at least in my unit. It's really to prepare for the future and to provide teachers and students and organizations with tools that will help them if we are again in the same situation. And there, exactly everything that was mentioned so far, the cloud computing, the artificial intelligence, the personalized learning, the learning analytics, and so on and so on and so on. And there is a huge potential there, but it's not used yet. And sometimes, to answer your question about management, I think it's also because the managers are simply not aware that this is possible to do it that way. I mean, I spoke with a lot of university professors in the last weeks, where they told me, well, we have been told to organize the exams that way. There was no point that we could even be a bit creative about doing it differently. And also, I mean, what Eva just mentioned, I mean, when you are teaching and you don't have the interaction, I've been a teacher in a past life. If you don't have the interaction and you cannot know if what you say has been taken by the people on the other side, it's very hard. If we would have a system supporting that, this would be much better. I mean, if you follow a Coursera class, this is what you have. Once in a while, the video stops and you need to click on something to answer a question, just to check that you are well following. So there are plenty of opportunities there, and it's important we build on this. Just one final comment. Nothing changed but the political side, because I think what this crisis brought is that it's now obvious at the political level that we need to invest into digital learning. In the past, it was maybe not so clear, and I think that now this is the momentum at every level, national and European, to say, look, we need it and we need to invest in it. And this is, I think, something important on a more political side.
Thanks, Anne. I want to bring in Filippo, because again, last night, when I mean, Filippo runs a blockchain research institute, okay? And again, I threw Filippo the normal curveball, and I said, you know, this blockchain thing we're kind of interested in or obsessed with, knowing where we are right now, can this thing actually help at some stage? And if these technologies, can they help now or when? And I'm also going to bring in, after Filippo, I'm going to bring in John and Wolfgang, I think, on this, because again, there are, you know, Fraunhofer Research Institute. I mean, John is again, has a research institute at the KMI. So if we can go with Filippo, followed by John and Wolfgang, I think we can start doing a bit of a deeper dive into this question. So Filippo.
Yes, Alex. Also because I have distinguished speakers about blockchains and educational technologies after. If you let me, I should want to speak about my experience as a professor at the University of Florence, because I hear some suggestion about teachers, the problem of introduction of new technologies in the university, and so on. Let me remind, perhaps the Italian situation is very different from the others, I suppose, but unfortunately, we were the first country to have the starting of the pandemics. And let me remind that 20 years ago, I was a young professor. I was a young researcher, the lecturer at the beginning of my career. And I was, especially among the jurists, I was one of the few interested in applying in my teaching new technology. 20 years ago was the introduction of Moodle, the possibility to have slides and other materials filled put in the Moodle e-learning system. Today is very different because technologies obviously have improved, and we need, as also I already listened to, we need a change on the method to do education. And I think the first investment to do is that, because if people reject new technologies or do not understand the great possibility that education online give, is impossible to implement a real e-learning education. At my university, as in many others in Italy, where new technologies were not so spread, in 20 days from the beginning of March until the 24th, was changed, and there was the passage from the education offline into online and streaming education. And many professors had a lot of problems or troubles because they intended to do the same lectures with new technology. So to have synchronous lectures, and it was very different. Students were very disinterested and bored during the lessons, because as you know, it's very difficult to follow a professor with the classic frontal lecture, hearing him for more than an hour. In our time schedule, classes last at least 1 hour and a half. So I think we have to get better to improve the knowledge and the useness of new technology among the professors, first of all. And so it's very important to create courses for professors in order to get the best from the possibility that technologies give them. And one more aspect, if I may, Alex, before, yes, I promise, I'm talking in the next turn, sorry, about new technologies, blockchain. You know that I'm involved in a research unit at the university called Babel, named Babel Blockchain Artificial Intelligence for Business, Economics and Law. And I'm very interested, especially for those distinguished speakers that are very eminent professors in this field. But I want to make you note something else. I think we have six points to consider when we talk about educational technology. Digital inclusion. It seems to me that Anthony said something about that. The other is datification for the introduction of artificial intelligence into mainstream education. There is a great problem, also legal problems in these, divisions of learning across humans and machines, and information technology industry, actors as a leading educational force. So we have to reimagine forms of educational technology suitable for an age also of climate change. We have to consider this aspect because we consume a lot of energy with these technologies. Think of alternatives. I don't know, is it possible, but convivial technology, respectful design, solidary economies. So I think we have to develop an EdTech agenda that addresses all these issues. And we must inevitably confront ourselves with the need to give relevance in education to what is beginning to happen in research. According to me, complex problems as today require synthetic solutions. And to do this, I think is the last point that I put in the discussion, is the instrument of interdisciplinarity or multi-level disciplinarity. And it is not can longer be postponed. The problem is that, as you know, it's very difficult between different scholars to talk because they have different languages, different methods. But I think we have to try to do this for the first time, at least in my experience, breaking the barriers between different disciplines. And this is particularly true for legal issues. Thank you, Alex.
Okay, thanks, Filippo. I'd like to invite John and Wolfgang and Monique, to respond to this. I mean, I learned quite a bit, and I think we're all kind of veering towards some sort of common identification of the problem. I'm just wondering if we can start thinking of possible solutions. John, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So I keep thinking about the current situation and the relationship to the current state of higher education across Europe. I was just looking up something called the red flag law. So when the automobile was first invented, it came onto the streets around 1865 in the UK, and the government, in its wisdom, created the red flag law, which meant you had to have a man, it says a man, who walked in front of the car with a red flag wherever it went. And they had one in the US as well. And then after a year, they realized it wasn't such a good idea. It was really hampering. And sometimes I feel like our education system is like that, in that it's basically a system designed 500 years ago, for a different era, on which we try to add a technological layer. So you take a 15th century system and processes, and then we add AI and learning analytics or blockchains to that. And for me, that doesn't make sense. It's the same as when film was first invented, and they filmed plays for a long time before they realized, well, filming a play is not the same as a film or a TV program. So I think we do have to think from first principles of what is it that we're trying to achieve? What's the goal of education? And as Anne was saying, I think this pandemic, one of the silver linings is that it's realized political and policy level and wider society that something has to change. So just one example, yesterday I had a conversation with the editor-in-chief of the Times Higher Education magazine, newspaper, which has 24 million visitors to its website every year. It's the main higher education newspaper in the UK. And they've been working on something that we've been thinking about at the OU for a while. So what we think at the OU is the idea that every single one of our 1,000 academics, many thousands of academics across Europe, replicates what they do when they go to a lecture hall. So when you go to a lecture hall, what you do is you prepare your slides, or you prepare your speech or your PowerPoint slides, and you prepare them yourself, and then you go and speak to 200 people or 300, and then every person replicates that effort. So we think that that needs to change. So they're thinking of, they're going to launch a website where people can share best practice of materials, but also how to. How to is very important. As Rosa was saying, there's a lack of, and you were saying, Alex, there's a real lack of expertise out there. So we need to share ready-made materials which are online and not move it away from the cottage industry. And we need to have a whole high-level strategy around online training. And we see ridiculous elements of it. So, for example, someone was telling me at a very top university in the UK, they were saying that it would only take a few hours to create an online course from an existing face-to-face course. So, so I think what I would advocate is to have almost like a brains trust, or a central European group where you bring together experts in pedagogy in higher education business models and technology to rethink from scratch what it is you're doing, rather than trying to simply layer on AI onto a broken medieval system.
Wolfgang, do you want to pitch in?
Yeah, I mean, you were also asking the question whether blockchain or any other technology really can help us to this respect. And I would like to pick up a few things that we have heard today. I mean, you were also talking about micro-credentials in your slides. We also heard about what Eva said, that the attention of students goes down very quickly. And I just can only repeat, I mean, just talking to slides and delivering voice augmented PowerPoints to the students, that's not the way to go. Yeah, because when we teach, we talk about experiences, we do storytelling, and we transport our personality. So I think it will all change towards a situation where we probably refer the students to well acknowledged micro courses where they learn something about a topic, and the professor, instead of becoming a teacher who's teaching the content, becomes a project manager. And Anthony, he was saying, well, we are not moving towards project-based learning. And I completely agree on that. Yeah, we are still talking to slides. So we really need to turn the whole teaching to more project-based learning. And then I think in the future, we will see project-based educational tool instead of Zoom and any other tools that just allow us to do video conferencing will become the next future for the e-learning stuff. Yeah, so if we do that we say, and that's also what John said, I think actually probably instead of 100 teachers teaching blockchain technologies, we just need one very good course on which we all agree. Yeah, then people can watch that. Yeah, they get the content, or they just get a book, or they get a video and augmented reality extended book. We tell the students, read that, and then we do a project based on that. Yeah, so you can also get the different content from different sides. And if we talk about that, we come to micro content, we come to micro learning. And for that, and now blockchain comes into the game. For that, we need some kind of identity management, we need micro-credentials and things like that. Yeah, so I think what blockchain really can deliver here is digital decentralized identities, knowing from who comes something, if this is authentic, if this is approved, and then that we can collect authentic credits for all the different things in a trusted network. And I think this is something where we can go to. And in general, I believe that in the future, I will not be anymore a teacher. I will be a project manager doing projects with the students, and they get their content partly from my courses, if they are good enough, but maybe also from a course from someone else.
Thanks, Wolfgang. Monique, I don't know if you've got, I mean, I'm aware of time.
Yes.
I know we started 7 minutes late. Well, I don't know if you'd like to add anything to this.
I just wanted to, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I think, first of all, it was an extremely interesting round of opinions and input that we've got. I think, if I may try to walk through some of the key points, I've been taking notes, and I think there's two kinds of aspects. On the one hand, we need to ensure the proper infrastructure is in place. So we need the tools, we need the cloud, we need the blockchain, we need a number of advanced or more advanced technologies that can help us creating a new kind of hybrid world. Some of you use this term. And I think that in doing that, of course, there are some essential aspects that do not relate at all to tools. It's about soft skills. It's about how we can manage to create a bond and to include the students and to motivate them into the learning process, which is not trivial also in real classes, right? So even if we look at how teaching is done nowadays in many higher education institutions, we realize that the way we are teaching, the way teaching is given, it's not at all fitting the needs of a native, digital native population. Some of the students are just not used to stay concentrated on anything but a few minutes. You know very much that the social media have brought this kind of new way of jumping from one topic, from one image to the other. And if we look at how lessons are given, I mean, how can you expect that a teenage or a young person would stay focused? So there's a number of experiments, there's a number of things that are happening, but as you guys pointed out, it requires a lot of changes, not only at educational level, but at policy political level. And what I think it's the most challenging aspect that probably today we didn't touch, but that Anne might feel very close to her also mission, is the fact that we're lacking of investments. Nowadays, with the COVID situation, we realized that Europe, or at least a few countries in Europe, did not invest enough in the most important things that are healthcare and education. So now we have to bring back this, I mean, the COVID situation in a way, as Anthony said, on the one hand, didn't change a lot. It just pushed for buying more tools and using more tools. On the other hand, what I argue, because I'm an optimist and I want to see that something is changing and something is moving, is the fact that there is much clearer awareness that our society needs digital supported education to continue functioning. And therefore, we need investments at private and public level that help us not only in terms of tools, but help us making the best use out of these advanced technologies potential for creating this hybrid world. Because if we want to create an engaging and participatory educational class or educational system online, we do need AI, we do need ways of pulling students into the interactive learning process, which, as Wolfgang pointed out, more of a project-like structure than a one-to-many broadcasting approach like we had so far. So I think we touched very important point. And in my view, what I would like to ask you guys, because you have been all on the front line in the last few months, what was, to be positive and to be optimistic, what was one main key finding that you think has helped you changing your approach to teaching and that you will take along in the future, no matter what?
Thank you, Monique, for the... Yes, I think Monique was, I don't know, Alex, if I understand right, Monique was asking to me or not. Monique?
No, Filippo, let me
intervene. From all of you, the speakers,
okay, thank you. Sorry.
How much more time do we have, Monique? I mean, because there's a very rich chat discussion going on here. I was aware that Anthony wanted to speak, or was being encouraged to speak. And I'm also aware of the fact that there was one more question we needed to ask. So if somebody can guide me in terms of time, are you guys prepared to hang around here for another 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Because we're okay. Is that okay? In that case, Anthony, did you want to share something?
Okay, yeah, I'm actually super happy somebody brought up this attention time limit, because I think it's a perfect example of where we are. Now, first of all, this is not new. We have known from brain research for nearly 50 years that our attention span is 7 to 15 minutes. This is one of the few scientifically proven, neurologically proven insights we have about education. And what have we done with it in the last 50 years? Absolutely nothing. I'm being slightly over dramatic because I mean MOOCs have taken on this quite well, but other industries do this. This is why at the airport you see the guy in the security change every 15 minutes from scanning people to looking at the screen, because they know they can't see bags come through and catch everything for 15 minutes straight, for example. The reason we haven't implemented it though isn't because we don't care. The reason we haven't implemented this is nobody has figured out how to organize a school day around 7 to 15 minute periods and get get everything in there. It's too logistically complicated. And I want to use this to link back to something Wolfgang was saying about micro-credentials. We all seem to agree that micro-credentials, student-centered learning, students choosing learning from where they find it most appropriate is the way forward. And to do this, though, we need to be able to understand what students are learning, and we need to have trust in with the people who are providing it. And that means a whole suite of new technologies. In the Europass, we've just been trying something very, very simple. We've been trying to recommend courses on the basis of what people have already learned. The problems we have with data quality are incredible. It is massively, massively hard at the moment to understand what courses actually teach, despite 25 years of policy focus on learning outcomes. So if we link this back to technology, I would say the new technologies we need most urgently aren't necessarily cool new ways to teach things. I think they're much more boring infrastructure issues. We need AI to be able to figure out what on earth is in a course curriculum and be able to trade it with other systems. We need identity management systems so that we can create trust registries of issuers. We need ways to combine different micro-credentials and offer achievements and credentials based on them. And all of these technologies will actually make what we've been promising for the last 25 years, which is true student-centered learning based on individualized learning pathways, true. The whole other set of things of recommender systems and so on, those are cool and those will come. But if we don't have the streets for things to run on, we can't build a new text on top of that.
Thanks, Anthony. Monique, I need your guidance on this one. We had another curveball question lined up, which probably is premature, okay? Because the question was, what key actions should the European Commission take to support digitally enhanced learning in a higher education context? In a way, what we're seeing here is, here's the beginning of our community of practice around DEL4ALL, right? You can see, and for us, I think, or the partners here, this is what's going to drive this project and make it meaningful. These various ideas that we need to collate and collect. At the same time, I keep on looking at Anne, because at the end of the day, Anne has to, and her team need to get something useful out of this, okay, so that they can then project into the future, whether it's new funding regimes, whether it's projects to support, whether it's things like even like blockchain accreditation, where we all know that unless there are policy decisions taken very high up within the Commission, okay, a lot of the stuff which is being built might risk being stillborn, for all I know. So that's my last question, and I think if we can spend 2 minutes on it, and I think probably then we're running out of time. So the question really is, what key actions should the Commission take to support what we want from digitally enhanced learning in a higher education context? I'm just leaving the mics open. Anybody wants to intervene? I think we can spend 2 minutes, and I think we probably can close there. So would anybody like to suggest something?
I would say something, Alex, if I may, on that. Yeah. So this isn't a fair point, okay? So hopefully Anne won't take it personally. So I think for me, we need an experimentation. We need a sandbox which may cross units. So so I think, as I mentioned before, there are issues at all levels. It's not just a technological solution. There's a training solution. There are process solutions. So having something which mimics what one does in software, where you have a sandbox area where you can experiment, and that might be something like, so imagine some form of experimental university, or the equivalent of an experimental course. So here's something where you have either pilot students or real students. You have pilot elements of a course team or a teaching team, and then they can experiment in the same way that the MOOC companies did when they came in. So MOOC platforms are of course new. So having something where we can test different pedagogical methods and different tools would be useful. So that would be and that wouldn't be easy to implement.
So a sandbox that potentially involves more than one DG as well, in terms of being vested stakeholders in this project, right? That's what you're suggesting.
So that's the tricky part. To bring in the different years.
Does anybody want to suggest anything else? Or are we all tired and done? I'm fully aware of the fact that we've taken up more of your time.
It's Hotter here. It's Hotter here.
Yeah, sorry. Tell me.
So please go on.
Okay.
If I may, Alex.
Tell me.
Yes, if I may, great idea from John Domingue. Let me suggest something very similar to the sandbox that reminds me solutions for the financial technology industry. But in this case, could be an Erasmus program dedicated to professors and students that want to create a common form of education in Europe. So in order to promote this kind of innovation, it could be strange to do an Erasmus remaining at home, I know, but should be an Erasmus of method and contents, not of traveling, something new.
Can I say something, Alex?
Sure.
It's just, I think that listening to all of this, I'm getting tickled that I need to bring these ideas and messages to school across the world. So if there could be something where we could listen to school clusters or headmasters or a few champion schools across Europe, where we could pilot test a few ideas and bring all of this innovation to their hands and say, hey guys, create some pilot classes here, with a group of pilot teachers where we can test these ideas and this approach. So it's coming, you know, in a bottom-up wave. That would be really a great opportunity to have, not only at university level, but beginning much earlier, even in primary school, like interdisciplinarity in horizontal and vertical levels diagonally, so that, you know, we can have solutions coming from the field and the people that are working with the students.
Thank you. Monique, would you like to close the session? I think
I just say something after the idea. Yeah, I would just like to say 2 sentences after the ideas for the Commission, because she feels she has to. I mean, I heard a lot about testing. And I should insist here that this is something that we have been trying to do for quite some time. And I mean, each time we have been calling for projects, we really ask them to have scenarios where they test in real with a certain number of schools and students. In practice, it appears to be extremely difficult because people are not very committed. You know, they say, yes, we will try the system, and then nothing happens. So this is extremely difficult in practice to do it. And second thing, when we talk about this kind of lovely university where we could try everything, I would like to remind everyone here that education is a member state's prerogative. So we cannot create something at European level like that. I mean, it will also have to be like it is now. I mean, member states are still in charge of education. It's not delegated to the European Commission. So there are limits to what we can do as well. Just 2 points.
Anybody else have anything?
With one that hasn't been mentioned yet. Actually, John's idea, to some extent, the European University Alliances are producing some very interesting sandboxes, at least in some of them. But one of the things that I wanted to focus on a little bit more was the interoperability. And I can take this direct from experience now with Europass. We had 3 different standards on credentials competing just from inside the European Commission, produced by different Directorate Generals. Standardization is the key to everything. If we can create standards, be it for interoperable learning records, be it for credentials, be it for blockchain identity systems, and I mean the list could continue, there's a basis for member states to start on, etc. And the only way to create standards is to get every single stakeholder around the same table to work on it. As long as there are any types of barriers, you end up with competing standards, and it makes the life worse rather than better. And I mean, educational standards don't really have a single home. I'm not going to dare say where that home should be, but my dream from the Commission would be to see EMPL, EAC, and Connect create some sort of, let's say, cross-standard for technology standards in education. I think there's a lot of work a lot of us could do if such a thing existed. Or it just needs a home in one of the DGs. But yes, standardization and a single source would be my #1 wish.
Can I just want to do something visual now, and we stop with this. Who agrees with Anthony? And I'm raising my hand here, okay? Because this is something which I think needs to be acknowledged here, okay? And I think that might be the solution, that if it's very difficult to get different DGs, in a way to say we're gonna do this together, maybe find a home in one of the DGs to look at this. But I think the idea of interoperability, standardization, these are things we've been writing about, some of us, since 2016, 2017. And no amount of building of technologies is going to solve this unless at EC policy level, these decisions are taken. And many of us who are operating at EC level, even within member states, I've been a member of the Delta working group, the ET 2020 working group for 7 years. Member states talk to each other. People really want this to happen, despite the fact that every single member state can do what it wants with education. And I think if there's something good which can come out of this project, and I don't know how the solution is going to be, that as a byproduct of DEL4ALL, maybe we should focus on this as one of our deliverables. Okay, so I purposely stayed quiet on this one because it's something I'm quite passionate about. Monique, I think you need to close us now and bless us so we can all go back to whatever it is we're doing.
Okay. I just wanted to, first of all, thank all the participants, also the ones that didn't have a chance to speak, and thank the speakers. We've taken notes, we will try to elaborate on them, and the dialogue doesn't stop with the end of this call. The dialogue goes on. It's very important that the points that we have identified are actually taken into account in all possible debates that help converging to standards. As Anthony said, on the other hand, we have to be very much aware that, as Anne underlined, Europe is Europe, in the sense that we have different member states, we have different cultures, we have different languages. So we have a melting pot in which to create an homogeneous educational system, it's probably not what we want, because we have different cultures and different ways of teaching and learning different disciplines. So I believe the future will be even more diversified thanks to advanced technologies. And this is going in the direction of personalized teaching, personalized learning. And given the fact that we have quite of a strong, I mean, let's take some merits. Europe has a very strong and well-structured tradition in terms of education, maybe a little bit too much, because then we are less open to changes and to novelties. On the other hand, I think this crisis situation has created a different awareness and a different scale of priorities. So DEL4ALL remains and will continue to work on different aspects. So I would like to just, remind about a few points. We have run a survey recently. Now we will launch next week a higher education survey that will be open until end of August. We will have a dedicated webinar mid-September, in which we would like to present the results of this survey that we're running. And in any situation, you believe there are elements that should be taken into account in the dialogues, in the events, in any of the activities that we are supporting. We are an open community, and we welcome your input. Having said that, I would like also to thank my colleagues, the partners of DEL4ALL that have not been speaking in this webinar today. And I would like also to wish you all a safe and sunny summer.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think
Bye,
we've done it. Thanks.
Thanks
Thanks
a
a lot
lot.
for your time. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye bye.